Salut! Today we're going to go over our 7th lesson. In this lesson, we will see what prepositions we use in French with uncountables. That is, things you can measure but not count, like water, rice, or flour, for example. We will also see how to use il y a, which most often translate there is or there are, as well as an introduction to the conditional form, with the polite form je voudrais, which allows you to ask I would like rather than making a demand saying I want. We are also going to see the interrogative pronoun quel, which is translated by which in English, as in which cat do you love? And finally, we will see how to tell time in French. Please remember to download the notes to follow along. The link is right under the like button, I think, and while you're there, remember also to subscribe to this channel if you're not subscribed yet. So let's get started. First, the uncountables. Well, we first need to identify the uncountables. As I said, it's things you can measure but not count. By that, I mean that even when you say one coffee, what you have in mind is one cup of coffee, not one of the liquid coffee. But coffee is not a great example because we're so used to counting it when we order it every day as a cup. So let's switch to rice and flour. My recipe would sound silly if it said one flour, and it would make a terrible bread. What you need is a unit of measurement or a container, as in one cup of flour. Well, these things are what we refer to as the uncountables. It's not a group of supervillains, simply things you need to measure. Other examples are money and luck. You can count your dollars, but you can't say I have one or two monies or one or two lucks. Now that this is clear, let's figure out what prepositions we use in French for the uncountables. With masculine nouns, we will use du. With feminine nouns, we will use de la. With plural nouns, there are not that many and they are the same as the indefinite article in lesson 1, but for these plurals, we will use the partitive article des. This means that to say I eat rice, rice is masculine, so we say je mange du riz. To say I eat flour, flour is feminine, so we say je mange de la farine. Gross, by the way. And finally, pasta in French is plural. So I eat pasta in French is je mange des pâtes with an S because it's plural. Please note that when a noun starts with a vowel, we will always use de and L apostrophe. This is why water is de l'eau, spelled de, then L apostrophe, I-E-U. Another thing to note is that when we have a negative sentence, or if the container is mentioned, we simply use the preposition de, which means of. Because we say none of something or a cup of something. So I don't eat rice is je ne mange pas de riz. A cup of coffee, une tasse de café. This one works for all of them, so it's an easy one. And let's add one more exception to that, always exceptions, but it's something we already saw, so it's easy. Verbs like aimer, adorer, or détester, which mean respectively to love, to adore, or to hate, will always use a definite article. This is why we say j'aime le café or j'adore le riz. Okay, now for our second part, we will learn that French for once is easier than English. Yes, easier. See, in English, you have to say there is or there are, depending on if we are referring to something singular or plural. You say there is a bird, but there are birds. Well, in French, there's only one. It's il y a. Here are 3 examples. Il y a un train à 7 heures, meaning there is a train at 7. Il y a 5 souris dehors, meaning there are 5 mice outside. Il y a de l'eau dans le verre, meaning there is water in the glass. Did you spot which one used an uncountable here, by the way? Sorry, just trying to keep you on your toes here. But to go back to il y a, there's not much to know apart from the fact that if you need to turn it into a question, you will need to use either the form est-ce qu'il y a or y a-t-il. So is there cake will be either est-ce qu'il y a du gâteau or y a-t-il du gâteau. Next, we have to dip our toes into the concept of the conditional mood in French. The conditional mood is a way to conjugate the verb that implies that a condition has to be fulfilled for something to happen. Because when one is polite, one offers a way out in their requests. This is why it's often used as a polite way to ask something. What I mean by that is that when you say, I would like a slice of cake, you imply if you are willing to give it to me or if there's some left. But when you say, I want a slice of cake in the indicative mood, you demand something. Today, we are just learning how to say I would like. It's simply je voudrais. Again, je voudrais. This is what you would use when ordering at a cafe or a restaurant. So for example, to say I would like a cup of tea, you would say je voudrais une tasse de thé. To add more politeness, we will need to learn how to say please. We have 2 forms to say please in French, the tu form and the vous form. Here, if we assume we're ordering something, we would prefer the vous form. Same goes for asking for directions in the streets. To say please to a stranger, we say s'il vous plaît. Again, s'il vous plaît. Now, if you happen to have to ask something to a friend, you would say s'il te plaît. Again, s'il te plaît. Now, the interrogative pronoun quel, which means which, has a different form depending on the gender and number of the noun associated with it. However, they are all pronounced exactly the same, even though they're spelled differently. Let's put them on the screen. It's to my left, I think. So you see what I mean. I will use which man, which woman, which men, and which women as examples so you can immediately understand the concept. Which man is quel homme? Quel here has only one L. Which woman is quelle femme? Quel here has 2 L's and an ending E. Which man is quels hommes? With 1 L and 1 S. Here I am pronouncing the ending S only because homme starts with a silent H, so I am making the liaison. And finally, which women is quelle femme? With 2 L's, 1 E and an S. Since the interrogative pronoun which usually comes in a question, we need to know how to finish the sentence. Well, if there's a subject and a verb in your sentence, with which, you can just invert the subject and verb after. This means that which cat is he will just be, like in English, quel chat est-il? Now, if your sentence comes with no other subject, for example, which woman eats cake, you will just finish the sentence conjugating like a regular sentence. So it will be quelle femme mange du gâteau? Again, I hope you spotted that cake was uncountable here. Finally, how to tell time in French? Well, let's start by asking what time is it. In French, we say, which hour is it? You can probably make this sentence now. hour is said heure in French, and it's feminine. So we say, quelle heure est-il? Again, quelle heure est-il? In French, it's pretty easy to tell time. We say, il est, as in it is, then the number of hours, followed by the word heure, which means hour, and the number of minutes. Do not forget the word heure. In English, we say 10:10, for example, but in French, we have to say 10 hour 10. So 10h10. The other thing you need to know is that we use military time in French. All you need to do is add 12 if it's in the afternoon. 2 p.m., 2 plus 12, 14. That's it. Now, I don't want another French teacher to destroy me in the comments, but I'll say it. As a Parisian, I always use the 12-hour time system. And if the context isn't clear, I just add du matin for AM and de l'après-midi for PM. So 2 AM is 2 heures du matin, ou 2 heures du mat, and 2 PM is 2 heures de l'après-midi. Now you do what you prefer. I'm just putting this out there. But finally, even though you can tell every single time on the clock with the simple system il est plus the number of hours plus the word heure plus the number of minutes, there are some expressions you might need to learn. And here they are. First, to say noon, we say midi. To say midnight, we say minuit. To say and a half, we say et demi. To say and a quarter, we say écart. When we count back on an hour, as in 10 to 3, for example, we say moins and the number of minutes. So 10 to 3 is 3 heures moins 10. Finally, a quarter to is moins le quart. So, for example, a quarter to 3 is 3 heures moins le quart, as in 3 hours minus the quarter. Okay, well that's it for today. Let me know in the comments if you have any question. And as always, I hope you enjoyed our class and learned something. À la semaine prochaine.